Hello students, welcome to the Service User and Carer Participation module. This short video is to help you plan your assignment briefing. There are 6 assessment criteria to think about when writing your report or assignment, and I'm going to go through them in turn. The first assessment criteria is establish the importance of service user and carer participation. Right at the beginning of your assignment, it's a good idea to start with an introduction and to set out in a brief paragraph how you're going to cover your topic in relation to the 6 criteria. There's certain key terms or words used in the assessment criteria, such as participation, empowerment, even service user. And it would be a good idea to look at the wider literature for good definitions of these key terms. It'll make it much easier for you to show your understanding of the topic and to develop a good analysis. So, the first criteria, establish the importance of service user and carer participation. Here, one effective approach would be to think of it in terms of 3 areas. Firstly, participation, why it's so important to service users. Secondly, why it's so important to us as practitioners. And finally, what are the legal requirements? Because there's 6 assessment criteria, you will need to cover this section in no more than about 350 words. So rather than writing down all the ideas you can think of, or the reasons why participation is important, it's important to select some different kinds of examples. For the second assessment criteria, you're asked to apply a model of participation to the case study. For this, you need to introduce Arnstein's ladder of participation. And during the first session I explained to you that it would be a good idea to reference this and outline what the model involves and what the main purpose of it is. And to do that before you relate it to the case study. When you do relate it to the case study, it would be a good idea to use the model to identify at which level or ladder of participation the service user might currently be at. Having done this, you could then discuss what would need to happen for the service user to be able to have more of a say or to participate better or more meaningfully in the decisions that are affecting him or her. For the third criteria, you are asked to consider barriers to service user and carer participation in decision making. Here, I would start by thinking about the case study that you've selected and what decision is being made and how the service user is being involved in that decision. Then, thinking about barriers, it would be really important to manage your answer well and structure it clearly. So you could talk about 20 different barriers at this stage, and we did lots of work last time we met and you produced some very good examples of barriers to participation and how they might be overcome. But remember, I said to you last time we met, don't discuss all the different kinds of barriers, but say that you're going to select a few different types of barriers. So let's say you give an example of a physical barrier for the service user in your case study. Well, maybe you could contrast that with a very different kind of example about self-confidence or about an organisational barrier or perhaps something else. For the fourth criteria, you're asked to explore the contested nature of empowerment. This is where you really need to draw from the wider literature to find the different views, and all the conflicting views even, of what empowerment means. Another way of saying empowerment might be to say how we empower service users. But if you look at the radical definition of this term, social work practitioners can't empower service users can only empower themselves. So definition of empowerment really does vary tremendously according to the perspective. So if I were you, I would look at these different definitions at the beginning of my answer to this section, and then develop my analysis by thinking about what different models of empowerment might look like in practice in relation to the case study. For the fifth criteria, you are asked to consider ways in which people might become empowered. So this is moving on from the last criteria, or you could link them together if you wanted, but I think this one here is asking you to use the case study to think practically what empowering the service user better might look like. Remember, you've looked at the barriers to participation, you've talked about different ideas about empowering service users or helping them to empower themselves. Now think practically in terms of different ways, and again select different kinds of example about empowering service users. So you might, for example, look at how the individual service user might be better empowered in the case study, but you might also then think about that service user in a group of other service users, group empowerment, or even empowerment on a national level in terms of user voices and national charities. And there's some examples on the website in the useful links section of user-led organisations and national charities that you could look at there. Finally, you're asked to describe some aspects of anti-oppressive practice. Now, the word in there is some aspects because this is a fairly vast topic in itself. In quite a short assignment topic like this, where you're only going to devote 350 words to it, you really need to just begin to explore this area. Again, I would start by looking at how you might define the term anti-oppressive practice, and I would also relate it to social work values, such as in the Basel Code of Ethics. Maybe look at an example of a value there, and also think about the contribution of reflective practice, which is what we're going to cover in the second day of teaching. So, just some general tips for your overall presentation. Start with a brief introduction saying what you're going to cover. Make it very clear where and how you're going to cover each of the assessment criteria. Some of you tend not to use many paragraphs in your work, but be careful of that, especially if you have trouble proofreading your work for any reason. And sometimes people who use very long paragraphs also use very long sentences too, but often you can improve your presentation by cutting a long sentence in half. The other thing to think about is how you handle the case study. Now, case studies can run out of control, and it's quite possible to end up devoting more attention to the case study than actually showing that you understand the topic and can develop a good answer. So be careful with the case study. The idea of the case study is it's there for you to draw examples from it. Please don't describe in great detail everything that is in the case study in your assignment. That will be a mistake. What's more important is to show your understanding of the topic. So select some examples from the case study in response to each of the assessment criteria, but balance it with other examples from your wider reading. please get in touch with me if you've got any queries about what I've been talking to you about, or if you would like to arrange a tutorial. And the easiest way to do that is to email me. Thank you.